So years ago, my family started using a brand new Haggadah in our house. It's called the Different Night Haggadah. And when we came across that Haggadah, we came across some interesting new rituals that my family decided we were going to add to our Seder. Does anyone know what these are? Scallions. Scallions. And so there is a ritual that is associated with the Jews of Afghanistan. I've got a pretty scholarly, there we go, I see Shelley, the scholarly ritual. Does anyone know what that ritual is? Yes, we hit people next door to us with the scallions while we sing Dayenu. That is an Afghani Jewish ritual. And so when you're singing Dayenu, there's a lot of emphasis on the word die as you're hitting the person next to you at the same time. If you have these scallions at home, try it tonight at your Seder. You may say that it seems just a little bit silly. You can probably file it under one of those rituals that was invented to keep the kids engaged in the Seder for more time. I can tell you that at our house last night, that for Zev and his friend Sim, this was like the highlight of the night, was hitting each other back and forth with these scallions. That's why this is all that's left, because there are now scallions all over my house when they were chasing each other, but they really sang a heck of a Dayenu yesterday. But in all seriousness, I've been asking myself why it is that we do this ritual, or why it is that there are rituals like this that even evolved in the first place. Although in truth, I think that all of us here today, and certainly at home, know the reason. It's because, like so many things in the Seder, the scallion hitting is a light-hearted exercise in empathy at the suffering of our ancestors in Egypt. In many ways, you may even say the whole point of the Haggadah is an exercise in empathy, designed for one night for us to place ourselves in the context of being slaves and sympathizing with others. Why do we eat matzah? It's not only because because the Jews and the story in the Torah about how we had to put it on our backs and bake it in 18 minutes. It's because the rabbis teach us it's called lechem oni. Lechem oni is the bread of poverty. And so we're supposed to feel like the slaves did when that was the bread they ate in Egypt, or the bread that we all suffered from. And I want to tell you that if you hated eating it for a week, imagine what it must have been like eating it for 400 years. Or not only that, experiencing being so poor that you can't even afford a loaf of baked bread. Today we say the 10 plagues. You all know the ritual. We tape our pinky, and what do we do with it? We dip it into the wine and we take a drop out. And then another. And we do that 10 times. Why? Because the wine drops are the tears that we are shedding for the Egyptians, and we didn't lose sight of the fact that even though Pharaoh was a terrible and a cruel ruler that deserved his comeuppance, let's say it, right? He deserved it. That there were Egyptians who didn't deserve that. And so we empathize them, and even when they suffer with the plagues, we take a tear out. Only the question I want to pose to everybody gathered here and at home this morning, all the more so during our pandemic, is this. Is it really such a good idea for us to see Pesach as a holiday where we carry with us even more suffering? Haven't all of us suffered enough this year for not one Seder, but a whole year's worth of Seders? Or, let's put it another way. Let me ask you this. To what extent is it fine to empathize using scallions, but then to just say, Genuk, enough? Our world is full of heartache and suffering. Let's find a night where we can focus on joy and liberation and freedom instead. If you're familiar at all with the modern Haggadah industry or current Seder literature, you know that this is not the current tact taken by any number of Haggadot that are being published on a regular basis. My favorite that I got sent for free is called the Human Rights Haggadah. I got sent another one called the, quote, mass incarceration for questions Seder supplements. There was another one out there. I did some research. The Love and Justice in Wartime Seder supplement. I'm not saying that these aren't all important questions that we need to ask ourselves. It's only that it reminds me of a case study that I once studied during a Melton Scholar in Residence. I was studying with a scholar in residence this particular case about a person who saw the suffering of other people in the world waiting organ transplants. And so what did this person do? She literally gave away all of her organs, her kishkas, because she felt so much empathy at the suffering of others. No one is supposed to empathize to their own detriment. Yesh gvul, we say in Hebrew. There has to be a limit to our ability to empathize, especially in a world where so many of us are suffering so much. Another example of how I think this goes awry is how the traditional Musar thinkers think about the idea of empathy during the Pesach story. There's a well-known Musar text written by a rabbi called Rabbi Simcha Zissel Meklam. It's called the Igeret HaMusar. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the field of Musar studies, Musar is a field that is designed to cultivate human virtue and what we call value concepts among Jews. The text opens by teaching us, for example, that the only way to acquire Torah truly is to sacrifice and carry the burden of our fellow human beings. And who is the exemplar for this carrying of burden that the Jewish tradition talks about? Moses. Moses, according to the text, is the unique leader who carried the burden and the suffering of an entire people. The Torah even tells us this, Vayar b'sivlo tam, that Moshe was the one guy in Egypt who didn't turn away when he saw the suffering of Jews around him. That's why the Igeret HaMisar teaches us, Hirgash b'tzaram. Moshe would experience the pain alongside the Israelites. It was like he was giving them his kishkas, literally eating his kishkas away, as he not only experienced the pain, but felt it and internalized it deep inside of him. Only I have to wonder, during a year like this one, is this the kind of Jewish role model we want for ourselves? Think of all the stories we learn about Moshe. His father-in-law sees him suffering alongside everyone. It nearly wrecks his marriage. He gets angry. He smashes tablets. He hits a rock. Over-empathizing was clearly detrimental to Moses, to his mental health and his ability to make good decisions, reminding us that it is terrific to empathize with other people, to internalize the suffering of others to little bits. But to what extent? Hirgish b'tza'aram? Might Moses from time to time have been a more effective leader if he didn't internalize and carry all of that suffering and burden within him? After all, no therapist that I know empathizes with all of their patients all of the time. If they good, to go blunt about it, they would go nuts. You can't be a therapist who empathizes with every person and carries with you all of the sufferings of the world. If you need to find suffering in the world around us in this year of pandemic, you don't have to look very far. My mother used to tell me, growing up, that everybody has their tsuris. But I think today we are looking at tsuris on an unprecedented human level in the world around us. As human beings, especially in a pandemic, there is much to be said for people who do not choose to feel the pain of others. And I want to say this, for those of us who may have turned our backs on our neighbors, our friends, family, by acting irresponsibly or callously, with no empathy, I would remind you that Pesach requires us not to ignore suffering when it's around us. Only, given what I know about our Eitz Chaim Kehillah, I know that we are overall a group of compassionate people. And so perhaps Pesach, and this Pesach in particular, it is time for a tale of another sort. For one night a year, when times are fine, a little bit of empathy can go a long way. It's not bad to hit each other with scallions or to shed a tear from a cup of wine. But during a year when so many of us in this room and at home have suffered, aren't there enough wine glasses in the world? Rather, there are not enough wine glasses in the world to contain our sufferings. Maybe this is the year where we look a little bit more inwardly, not at the person next to us, but at ourselves. This is a year where we were taken from our families in a cruel virus. Seder plans were ruined. It doesn't seem like we have to try that hard to empathize this Pesach. And so instead, let's make this Pesach the one where we yearn to breathe free. Let us make this Pesach the one where we taste every sip of wine and experience the love and the joy and the feeling of thanksgiving for what we do have. We must, as Jews, always love our fellow human beings, but let us not forget to love ourselves first. Chag Sameach.